Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving deep into a fascinating intersection of geopolitical trade friction, cross-border waste management, and edge AI technology. If you've been following the year-to-date headline news, you've probably seen the absolute storm brewing over municipal solid waste, or MSW, being shipped across the border from Ontario down to U.S. landfills in Michigan. We're talking major players here, from Doug Ford in Ontario to Donald Trump in Washington, all wrapped up in USMCA tariff debates. But, this isn't just a story about garbage. We're going to look at how protectionist trade policies are forcing a massive technological leap, literally turning smartphone hardware into a digital compliance shield right at the border.
So let's take a quick look at our agenda for today. We'll be covering 1. The Ontario-Michigan Waste Corridor. 2. The USMCA Sunset and Tariff Wars. 3. A concept called the Sentient Bridge. 4. Pixel 10 Pro Edge AI. 5. The digital refineries UI and workflow. And finally, 6. Securing the circular bioeconomy.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the Ontario-Michigan Waste Corridor. Because before we can even talk about the software, we really have to ground ourselves in the sheer physical reality of what's moving across this border every single day. 3.46 million tons. Just think about that. That staggering number represents the amount of trash Ontario officially exports to Michigan landfills every single year. Ontario generates a massive amount of waste overall, about 16.88 million tons annually. And because domestic disposal costs have historically been way higher, about 27% of that simply gets loaded onto trucks and shipped across the border. It's a deeply ingrained structural dependency that's been going on for decades. And what's truly staggering is how that volume impacts the destination. Look at this. Canadian waste makes up a massive 14.35% of all solid waste disposed of in Michigan landfills, nearly 15%. This isn't just some minor trade anomaly, right? It highlights a profoundly intertwined ecosystem between these two regions. So the big question is, what happens if that cross-border pipeline just shuts off? Well, if the U.S. border closes to this imported waste, the consequences are immediate and, quite frankly, severe. Without the relief valve of Michigan's landfills, Ontario's domestic landfill capacity will be completely exhausted by 2034. It creates this immense vulnerability for Ontario's industrial and commercial sectors. They are effectively standing right on the edge of a capacity cliff. Which brings us to Section 2, USMCA, Sunset, and Tariff Wars. This physical dependency is crashing headfirst into a highly volatile macroeconomic wall. We are literally watching this trade friction play out in real time in the headlines. On March 10, 2025, in response to tariff actions from Washington, Ontario Premier Doug Ford enacted a 25% electricity export surcharge on border states like Michigan. Then, just one day later, amid threats from President Trump to double U.S. tariffs on Canadian metals, that surcharge was suspended. And if we fast forward to July 1, 2026, the mandatory review deadline for the USMCA, or SUSMA as they call it in Canada, passes without a renewal. All of this objectively shows how much regulatory churn and permanent uncertainty has been injected into the North American supply chain. In this risk matrix perfectly illustrates what hauling companies are up against. Pre-2025, it was totally business as usual. Super low tipping fees, like a 36-cent surcharge in Michigan, and pretty simple visual checks by customs agents. But look at those 2026 escalation scenarios. We're talking proposed $5 per ton surcharges and advanced radiation and X-ray audits replacing those visual checks. The bottom line here? Traditional waste hauling is dead. These escalation scenarios prove that hyper-accurate trade compliance is the absolute new baseline for survival. Moving on to Section 3, enter the Sentient Bridge. To solve this escalating border friction, we really have to pivot away from politics and look toward technological innovation. Because let's face it, you can't lobby your way out of a customs audit. You have to engineer your way out.
And this is where we find a truly fascinating solution. It's not just about moving garbage anymore. Enter the 905 Wood Digital Refinery. They act as what they call a sentient bridge. Instead of taking chaotic construction waste and blindly dumping it in a Michigan landfill, this digital framework categorizes, verifies, and converts that waste into high-purity feedstock for the pyrogenic biocarbon market. I absolutely love this quote from the source material. Wood only isn't a limitation, it's the moat. In a world where crossing the border with mixed waste triggers intense scrutiny and huge tariffs, 905 Wood's core thesis is brilliant. By specializing strictly in verifiable wood, they master the exact, granular level of compliance needed to cross international borders without a hitch. It literally turns a regulatory nightmare into a massive competitive advantage. Let's look at Section 4, Pixel 10 Pro Edge AI. So how do they actually guarantee that every single dumpster only contains clean wood out in the dirt before the truck even hits the highway? Well, they move the processing brain of the refinery directly to the front gates. Instead of relying on human inspectors, who, let's be honest, make mistakes, field operators are using an incredibly advanced on-device tech stack. They use the Google Pixel 10 Pro running Android 16. It leverages the Tensor G5 chip and Titan M2 secure element to run the Light RT AI runtime stack alongside Gemma 4 models directly on the phone. To put it simply, this isn't an app waiting on a laggy internet connection to talk to a cloud server. This is industrial-grade AI thinking natively right there at the dumpster. And the operational reality of this is incredibly fast. They enforce what's called the 2-second rule for multimodal intake. The operator captures a quick photo or video via the Pixel 10 Pro. Instantly, the 2.3 billion parameter Gemma 4 model performs native visual classification. A provisional compliance result is rendered in under 500 milliseconds. That blistering speed is what enforces the visual fallacy guard, ensuring that painted or chemically treated wood, stuff that might look perfectly safe to a human eye, never breaches the supply chain. All right, Section 5, Digital Refinery UI and Workflow. Let's peel back the software layer and see how this edge processing translates into a tangible, seamless user experience. From the very first interaction, the entire application workflow is fully automated. A request for quote, or RFQ, comes in via voice AI or a web form, grabbing the bin size and waste profile. The system then instantly auto-computes the estimated weight and models the customer's exposure to Ontario's CRI-CIL levy. It clearly shows the massive financial penalty for mixed waste versus clean wood. Within an hour, the operator gets a highly transparent, structured PDF quote. The UI surfaces actionable data right away, immediately shifting the conversation from just hauling trash to active financial risk management. Now, what happens when that truck actually rolls up to the US border? The output from this UI isn't just a paper receipt. It's a cryptographic PDF custom designed for customs agents. We're talking monospace, border officer-friendly typography. It features a hold-to-seal GPS stamp accurate to within 1 meter, a cryptographic hash secured by the phone's Titan M2 chip, and a scannable QR code verification. Honestly, this dumpster full of wood now has a more secure digital passport than most international travelers. It acts as an audit-proof certificate of origin, explicitly citing the HS 382 5.0 wholly obtained classification and specific Ontario regulations to completely bypass that severe 40% USMCA transshipment penalty. The main takeaway here is that the digital refinery fundamentally guarantees chaos in, verified purity out, and audit-proof documentation at every single step. By operationalizing Google's Vertex AI pipelines alongside AlloyDB in the cloud backend, they achieve true explainable compliance. So, if a U.S. customs agent demands an audit under the new USMCA sunset rules, the data is instantly accessible, completely verifiable, and legally defensible. Finally, Section 6, Securing the Circular Bioeconomy. Because you might be wondering, why go through all this trouble just to move wood? Let's connect this advanced tech stack directly back to the environmental and economic payoff. The answer is all in the financial engineering. The UI highlights decoupled billing, allowing clients to drastically lower their costs by avoiding that devastating $60 per ton circle levy for mixed waste. But here is the truly brilliant part. Because the wood is cryptographically verified as clean, 95 Wood routes it to bioenergy hubs, retaining 100% of the resulting carbon dividends, or corks. They aren't just saving money on border tariffs, they are actively minting high-margin environmental assets by keeping that wood out of Michigan landfills. It's a huge win, securing Ontario's industrial leadership in the global circular bioeconomy. As we look past the turbulence of the 2026 USMCA review, this explainer leaves us with a pretty profound question. We've just seen how one industry took the Google Pixel 10 Pro and built a sentient bridge to literally survive a trade war. So how will other industries leverage edge AI computing and on-device neural networks to redefine trade compliance, dodge tariffs, and generate assets across our borders over the next decade? The blueprint is already here, and as we've seen, it fits right in the palm of your hand. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. See you next time.